Hi all, this is Bog. Today we've got a +17 Dawnbreaker that I completed as Retribution Paladin just recently. We're going to go over some tips and tricks throughout the dungeon and just give a general commentary of the run as a whole. It's nice to be able to post a Retribution Paladin key rather than all the prop pelly keys recently, so I hope everyone enjoys. Coming into this first pull here, now I am at the moment running the pretty much big AoE build. I will pop on screen the talents that I'm running at the moment. I've found lately that committing to the Searing Light AoE build has been probably the best way to go about things. So we can see here, I have used Blessing of Freedom just a moment ago. So these Shadow Mages will put out a slow on players. This slow also does damage. So our Blessing of Freedom here will function more or less like a Dispel. The main issue I think I had in this pull was that I really needed to be main targeting the Ritualist. I know that even though we're playing a Searing Light, like big AoE sort of build, it's still very much a thing that we need to be doing is targeting the priority mob and then having our focus kick on the casters that we need to be kicking. Now, I may have just gotten a little bit lazy at the start of this key. Hopefully we sort of improve on that, because I know that's something that I've discussed in recent videos before as well. So again, this pull here, we basically just have the one Shadow Mage as a kick. Now, if you're playing with a Protection Paladin, there's an argument to be made that you might only need to, I guess, like you might not need to kick anything realistically. However, we are just going to be targeting down the Shadow Mage here. The benefit to having Arcane Mage and Frost DK is that the priority damage on the commander's already going to be pretty good. However, I think this is, again, probably mean just being a little bit lazy. We chuck out the Blinding Light to stop the cast there. Again, maybe not 100% necessary, given that we're playing with a Protection Paladin that should be able to do all of the kicks, basically. However, we've got through this pull all right. I think using Blessing of Sacrifice there on a player, getting the beam is generally a good idea. I am a big advocate of throwing out Blessing of Sacrifice pretty much whenever it's available. It's better to be using it on some damaging abilities rather than like sitting on it completely. Otherwise you can end up in situations where you are using it too late. Most of the time when you're aware of the fact that someone needs it, they're already very close to dead. So we're going over to the right side boat here first. I think this is generally the best way to be going about the start of this dungeon from a routing point of view. While Ret is not in this boat because our cooldowns are very much, I guess, like we don't really have cooldowns, right? This sort of fits better for the mage and the DK in the sense that they will be able to send cooldowns on this pack here. We would probably want to be main targeting down the commander here. The commander is the mob that's going to be doing the most amount of tank damage. However, targeting the web mage is also not such a bad thing from just a pure pace point of view, because it is the mob with the highest health. So I can probably go either way with the main target on this pull. The thing to remember with Ret Pally here is pretty much just watching when to use Blessing of Sacrifice on someone. You can see the web mage here casting this Bursting Cocoon. Now, it didn't go on the DK because the DK can AMS it and effectively cheat the mechanic, like they can do with half of the mechanics in the game already. But what we want to be watching for is that ability going on to a squishy DPS, particularly if they don't have a cooldown available. So we wouldn't want to be using it here, mainly because the explosion damage won't happen now that the mob is dead. But hopefully when we go into the next pull, we should be able to see an effective use of it. So we're going to have a Shadow Mage here, so there will be a Dispel to look out for. In terms of cooldown management, I'm not really going to talk too much about it. So we can see the Shaman here has this slow. I'm clearly too busy looking at my new follower and didn't actually put freedom on him, so that's just me being not good. It's also a good idea, I think, to install some dungeon packs that have the frame glows. So you can see here the mage has now gotten the bursting cocoon. Now he is rolling alter time here, so I am mindful that he probably doesn't need a sack. But yes, back to cooldowns. We, as Ret Pally, I think juggling offensive cooldowns is not really something we have to consider over much. The fact of the matter is that the shorter a cooldown is, the more incentivized you are just to sort of send it as soon as it's available, because sitting on it for any length of time means that you're just missing out on a use across the entirety of a dungeon. So my general rule of thumb for anyone playing Red is that if you have Wake of Ashes, unless the pack is like effectively dead in the next 2 seconds, you're better off just using it. We're coming in here to the boss. There's not too much to be going over here. I think with these beams, we sort of just want to be rotating through our Shield of Vengeance and our Divine Protection, not Divine Protection, the DR one, when the beams are going out during the non-overlaps. And then when they're coming out in the overlaps is when we want to be looking at our big defensives. You can see here, so that first one's generally a pretty easy one, and this next one will be an overlap one. So this is where we want to be looking at using some bigger defensives, especially if a healer doesn't have any abilities up and ready to go. It's also a really important thing on this fight. If it's looking like the healer's starting to get a little bit behind, we can throw out Word of Glories or Lay on Hands to sort of help out a little bit. It's not always entirely necessary. So this section here, it's not as big of a deal because the healer has a bit more time to sort of top everyone up first. However, this is just a really good thing to bear in mind. Obviously, there's not much else in the fight going on for us as a melee DPS. The ranged are the ones that are baiting the puddles. We pretty much just have to make sure we don't get hit by the beams. So if we can be helping out with any off heals for ourselves, you can see here I've used Lay on Hands already. We're coming into this beam. Now I did miss a defensive there, but that's not really a huge deal. This boss isn't going to punish you too much for missing any defensives or anything like that. Now, we didn't get an overlap there, but if you were unlucky enough and the Dispel had just gone out, it can be a really good thing as the Ret to sit back and heal everyone before flying off. If someone flies off with the Dispel still on them, the Heal Absorb one, they will die. We're going to come back in here. Again, full sending all our cooldowns. We're probably even going to get another full send here, just based on the amount of time it's going to take us to get through this last part. Again, I think it's very important as a Ret to pretty much be just looking to send Wake of Ashes and either Divine Reckoning or Execution Sentence pretty much on cooldown. I like to think of it like this. If you have, say, like Wake of Ashes is a 30-second cooldown, right? And you might sit there and think, oh, I'll hold it for the next pack. If you were to instead send it and you got to the next pack and there was 5 seconds left on the CD, you might end up in a situation where if you hadn't have sent it, you've effectively just missed out on an entire rotation of that CD. You can see here, this is where it's getting a little bit dicey. Now, if I was to go back in time, that is the point where I would say that we should be sending out some Word of Glories to try and help remove those heal debuffs, but Bagsy the Shaman has very much made up for it as well. You can see here too, the single target damage for Ret in this build is not, it's not amazing, but it is, I guess, serviceable. I think at the moment, the reason that I'm leaning more towards this heavy AoE sort of build is a lot of the classes that we're playing with at the moment are very strong in single target, very strong in funnel, and also on the flip side, we are not functioning particularly well with the more sort of priority target builds. Last season, I would have recommended, and I did play with a sort of Divine Arbiter build, more focused on doing a little bit of priority damage over the top of just mass AoE, but this season it's definitely a little bit different, which is, it's good. It's a much easier build to play. We don't have to worry about using Final Verdict in AoE at all. It's basically just build with our abilities. So say almost get stuck there. Last minute panic. Now we can see here Bagsy and Rav and Slump all have the Dispel. So obviously wasn't very on the ball. It's really good for me to do these sort of review style commentaries as well, because I can even pick up like instances where I myself have not played particularly well. So there's a lot of these Dispels going out that I realistically need to be getting, and unfortunately I do get one there, but the only reason I got one there is because it was on me. So I think I noticed that it was on me. Definitely need to be looking at getting something that has a bit of a frame glow so that I can actually see when these abilities are going to be going out. In this pull here, I think we want the priority target to be probably the Tactician these days, although it's another one of those pulls where it doesn't particularly matter. Oh, you can see being good Ret Paladin, I did another Dispel. So I'm starting to lock in a little bit here. I think you could probably go either way with this pull. It's another one that doesn't have a very obvious priority target. You would maybe argue that the Tactician is probably the mob that we want to be killing first. However, I think attacking the Shadow as the primary target is also just not a bad idea. They both got roughly the same health, so speed-wise it should be much the same. It's just that the Tacticians are just going to be more dangerous. Now, we can see here, this is a pull where I think after the fact I noticed that I was being a little bit of a naughty Zug Ret Pally. This is a situation where we don't want to be Divine Storming. So all of these mobs here, they're not there for us to AoE down. They're there for the mage to be able to do more damage. Unfortunately, I come in there like the smooth brain DPS that I am sometimes, and I Divine Storm everything. And it isn't until now you can see I start to use Verdict. I think I then realize, oh wait, I've just killed all of the funnel. Now, I did make a video on this in the past, but typically speaking, these are the situations where, yes, we want to be sacrificing our own overall, although I don't know if my ego could have handled it, because if we look at the damage for this pull, I'm still doing not much damage, but we want to be sacrificing our own ego, just single targeting, even if we're running an AoE build, and giving the mage the opportunity to do more damage, because this pull now has taken, I think, substantially longer because the funnel has all died. So this boss is now just been a big target dummy for the last 30 seconds. Now, if we had not sent on the little guys with our Divine Storms, then it might have died 20, 30 seconds quicker. It might have lost 10, 15% more health. We're going to be flying over to the Lust pool. Now, I think obvious sort of one here is that these pulls, the mini boss itself is going to be our primary target. You can see I've set a focus kick on one of the casters. We're going to be kicking this as much as we can now. We need to be looking for the Dispels here as well. So Bagsy has one at the moment. Fortunately, he is actually balling a lot harder than I gave him credit for, because he's pretty much able to heal through it. Looks like our prop Pally is doing a lot of the Dispels and things. So this is a good review from me, and it's a good thing to see that, you know, I'm obviously not exclusively playing Ret these days, so these are the things that I need to be making sure that I'm not missing. Those Dispels, another level or two higher, all of a sudden we're going to be like putting a lot of unnecessary pressure on the healer. Now, I bubbled the debuff there, which I think is a really clever use of bubble for any paladins. It does chunk quite a lot. So if you can immune it off, that's basically just a win. Otherwise, now this pull's sort of wrapping up. There's not too much to be said here. The main thing we need to be looking for is using Blessing of Sacrifice on any players that have the ticking damage debuff, particularly at the times when the orb is about to hit the wall. That's when it's the most dangerous, this pull. If you have the debuff on you and this orb is about to explode, that's the times where people are going to die, basically. So we can see here, Slump has it, the mage. I really, really needed to be using a lay on hands or a sack there. He got to like less than 5% health. So I didn't quite realize how good of a review this would be, because I think when I did the key, I thought that I'd played quite well, but apparently I missed a lot of beats here, which is, it's just a good thing to consider going forward. Now, again, the tactician will be our primary target here. It's not, again, as big of a deal for Ret Paladin, because if we're playing this Searing Light build, then our priority damage is almost so negligible that we can main target whatever we feel like. However, having our main target be the thing that we want to be killing the fastest is generally a good idea, just because we know that one of our big hammers is going to hit it. There's not too much to consider here. There's no shadow mages in this pool, so we don't have to worry about the slowdown debuff. We're just going to slowly work our way through it. Now, some of you might have noticed that this route is a touch different. I actually am a big fan of the way that we went about this. So ordinarily, what I've seen lately and what I've done myself, this pull would ordinarily be something that we would be doing during the final boss. It's a fairly easy pull. There's not much going on. However, this route actually does this like now, and does the pull on the other side there, like the really scary one during the final boss, but uses Lust there. So I thought that was a really interesting mix-up. I think I very much liked it. I thought it was a really good use of Lust. It was probably one of the very few routes I've seen in a long time where all 3 Lusts in the dungeon were committed to packs rather than bosses. We didn't lust a single boss here, which is a very interesting sort of route. This here, very, very similar to the last mini boss. We can see I've used a Blessing of Sacrifice on Bagsy here. The main thing to consider here is when the pulsing AoE damage comes out from the mini boss, the person with the debuff is going to get hit really hard. As a paladin, we can do what I just did there, which is use Blessing of Sacrifice. We can also be very mindful of when we want to be using our lay on hands as well. You can see I am doubling up on defensives there, but I think that's definitely worth doing, especially with the intensity of the damage that goes out in the pulse with the dot still on you. Alternative is to bubble as well. Bubbling is something that I would say is a really good idea to use on this pull. It's ordinarily the pull that's done directly prior to the fact that the DK can just immune that is like, someone nerf DK, please. It's actually unfair. So we got the Abyssal Blast coming out. It'll be interesting to see how I decide to handle this. I wouldn't want to be bubbling now just because the mob is so close to dying. It's obviously hit us. Oh, we're getting a second one. Excellent. So this might be a situation where I would consider bubbling. I think like in hindsight, I would probably want to be just looking to use lay on hands. That's exactly what I do. The reason we're sort of looking to save bubble is we kind of want to make sure that it's up for the overlap phase of the next boss. It's the point of the dungeon that's going to do the most damage overall. Now, coming into the boss, we're making reasonably good time here. My damage overall hasn't been fantastic. I think this isn't a very good Ret dungeon with the current tuning and the builds that we're using. However, the overalls at the end didn't look too bad. The main thing that we want to prioritize here is the way that we sort of juggle our defensive. So with these first 2 shadowy decays, we sort of want to be limiting it to like 1 minor defensive and maybe like a health pot if absolutely needed, and then saving our bubble for the later overlap. Resending the orb down. Now it's probably ideal to be getting the orb as Ret because we can still do most of our damage here. These little shadow guys you need to be mindful of, because if they do cast when that orb explodes, it can just sort of unfortunately kill someone. Blinding Light's really good for that. I would probably hold Blinding Light in a no comms group for a situation where the pulse is going out and there's a couple of ads alive. Again, though, I don't think there's ever really any need to be holding on to Wake of Ashes for the ads. I think over the course of a fight, if you keep doing that, you may just end up losing an entire Wake of Ashes or two, which is significantly worse, I think. These ads, realistically, they need to die, but they don't need to die like so insanely quick that like they're not. Like, we don't need to be sending our CDs on them. So this is the overlap here. The orb's going to hit. We're going to bubble sack someone for this one. Now, at this key level, it's okay because we're only going to get one overlap. The boss is already at 40%, so he's not going to get around to another one. We overcommitted defensives there. If we're at a key level or two higher where the boss has enough health that we might actually get a second overlap, it can be really bad if we commit too many defensives there and then don't have enough in about a minute and a half's time. But otherwise, it's sort of looking all good. We get the opportunity to send all CDs on the ads, which is always nice. And then a Shadowy Decay coming out. We're using one minor defensive here. So same sort of cadence. We go minor defensive, major defensive. And that's sort of the way that you want to roll through things. So the damage on this boss for Ret is actually probably one of the better ones. And it's mainly because, like, while we're not holding our Wake of Ashes for the ads, we are sort of often lining up with it. So even here, I did hold on to it for a few seconds because I noticed that we only had like a couple of seconds until they come out. Now, this is a good opportunity to be using any blinding lights or Hodges. You can see me sort of mousing over things, getting ready to kick. They're the times where the ads are going to really muck somebody up, I suppose. It's when the pulse is going out at the same time as the ads are casting. If a cast or two gets off, then that can be the death of someone. Coming into the final mini boss, we will have some Shadow Mages coming in here. Now, they do reduce damage, so we don't have to worry as much about the Blessing of Freedom tech. However, the main thing to bear in mind here is that we want to be watching the players who are getting channeled by the beams and using our Blessing of Sacrifice on them. So we're going to get the next Tormenting Eruption will be me and our Magician. The thing that we want to be bearing in mind here, though, is you don't want to be using Blessing of Sacrifice on the other person with the pulse if you also have it, because you're also taking your own damage, right? So this situation here, I would ordinarily say that sacking the Shaman there is a good idea, but he does have Astral Shift running, so that means that he can look after himself for a little bit. In general, this one here may be a good idea, and you can see I do actually do it. So I must have locked in a little bit. And then because that alternates, yeah, you just want to make sure that, like, so in this situation here, I really wouldn't want to sack the mage. Even if he was going to die, if we use Blessing of Sacrifice on the mage there, then we are going to die. We've got the damage coming out on ourselves, plus 30% of that damage reflected onto us is not a good idea. We don't want to be doing that. But I think the thing to highlight for this run is that, like, it's gone very smoothly. I think, like, mechanically speaking, my dogs are going to make a lot of noise. How dare that dog walk past? Mechanically speaking, I think the dungeon's gone very well. The group as a whole has done all of the dungeon specific mechanics really well. The thing, like, looking back at my own performance, is that I have used some group externals, but definitely nowhere near as much as I should have been. I think if I was to go look at the logs after this run, I would probably see that I could have used Blessing of Sacrifice another 6, 7, 8 times. I could have probably, I definitely could have used Blessing of Freedom on that dot at least 10 times I can think of off the top of my head. So while I do these commentary runs, I'm by no means a perfect player, and I think it's a good thing to look back at them and you can either learn from my mistakes or do something like this yourself and work out where you could have played better. Next time I go into Dawnbreaker, I'm going to pay a lot more attention to using Blessing of Freedom and using Blessing of Sacrifice on different people, because despite the fact that this went well, at times using your externals well as a Ret Pally is the thing that will, I guess, be the difference between a timed key and a non-timed key. So this is where this route differs. We are now going to fly down and do this pull here. Now, I'd sort of forgotten that we were doing this. I was a little confused. I thought this was extremely dangerous mid-boss. However, we are going to use Bloodlust. So I think this is actually extremely fast. It's a really good use of Bloodlust, actually. While Bloodlusting the final phase of this boss isn't a bad thing necessarily, I don't actually think you gain a whole lot of time out of it. And this pull typically is extraordinarily difficult. So what we've done here, I realistically should probably be targeting the Ritualist, and any DPS that aren't a Ret Pally. If you're still here, then like you're a legend. Thank you for watching 26 minutes of a Ret Pally commentary and you don't play a Ret Pally. Any DPS should probably be targeting the Ritualist there just to get most of the damage into it. For us as Ret, I think targeting the Tactician is definitely not a bad thing. And realistically, in this group, it's actually worked out well because, see, the Mage and the DK were obviously on the Ritualist, so we've managed to actually even out the time that it's taken. Now, rolling in here, 4 minutes 50 left. We realistically, at this point, it's a foregone conclusion. We know what's going to happen here, right? It's, unless we make a big mistake, it's a timed key, basically. Now, a couple of important things to note. These webs will hurt a lot. So having a defensive ready is generally a good idea. Alternatively, what you can actually do with those is have some healing ready to go for yourself. So that last one that just went, I used, funnily enough, Gift of the Naru, the Draenei passive. This is a bit of an awkward one here. We did just use a Word of Glory and a health potion just because of the ticking dot with the wave. Otherwise, the wave you can pretty much just eat as long as you're at full health. You can see I'm absolutely just getting bullied by this boss here, which is very unfortunate. What you can do there is exactly what I just did. If you get the circle on you, the web circle, and you know that you don't have many defensives available, you can build up to 5 holy power on the boss and then run it out and use that holy power for a Word of Glory on yourself. And we get another one here. So this boss does not like us, at least like we're sturdy. And another one. So I've done this here. I've come out. I had the defensive, but I also had the holy power ready to heal myself if I needed to. We want to be looking to use Blessing of Sacrifice if it's not on us and it's on one of the other players. Unfortunately, similar situation to that mini boss just prior to this boss. You do not want to be sacrificing someone when you yourself have it already. You can see here we are sort of making a little bit of a mess on the left side here. Little quick move to the left there. But again, that was a double Word of Glory as well. I think it's most important to be mindful of those webs, like having something available, because they can kill you if you just try to eat it raw. Even if you've got like Divine Steed to get out of it quickly, it's not always enough. So we got another one here. Now this one I was not as good with. We did have Gift of the Naru. It's just that, like, looking back at that, I would say that that needs to be a minor defensive at the very least, especially without Divine Steed to get out of it. Otherwise, in terms of like cooldown management, there's not really a lot to consider with this boss. I think you basically just send all of your cooldowns as soon as they're up. Again, similar to my guide that I made earlier, we're prioritizing Judgment. We're getting another one. So I'm making a bit of a mess on the left side here. You can see I have used a minor defensive. Also used a Word of Glory. So it's very important as Ret to be able to look after yourself a little bit when those web circles come out on you. If you have Divine Steed, that's a really good way to go about it. Making sure you've got at least 3 Holy Power for a Word of Glory if you need it while you're out there is good. And then using like Shield of Vengeance as a defensive is obviously going to work. So we come out here, we've got 5 Holy Power, we steed our way out, and we didn't need to use a Word of Glory there. We'll be sitting in here, 0.2% left, we got the Spirit Link. This is pretty much walking it in. Now, this was reasonably tight, well, tight-ish, there's only 40 seconds under, but I think there's definitely some things to be improved there. We can see we ended the dungeon at 6.45. I'm not sure why details bars are so much smaller. It's not a great ret key, so I'm not too unhappy with that overall. However, definitely a little bit of tidying up that's needed. I need to be much better with my externals. You can see me whinging about ret being bad there. I think I didn't play all that well, but I think these runs are definitely worth going over. I hope everyone who has watched to the end, firstly, thank you for watching half an hour. That's a long, long way. I hope everyone learnt something from it if they did watch the entire way through. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in. Till next time, gamers, take care.